workplace and go back home. So if you look at the International Labour Organization, they define safety and health working environment free from violence and harassment. So what we've come to learn in the workplaces is that we find there is a lot in matter of safety, but in this case, specifically we want to talk of harassment and violences at workplaces as one of the big problems in fact we face in security sector. So what does the introduction as the harassment in the defined by the International Labour Organization, they talk about it is this is what you find as behaviors. They could be coerced, which again does not fall or does not go well with all the workers. So that's pretty much, I think, this might keep on going, but I think you can also hear me. So it is unacceptable behaviors, and these acceptable behaviors that is in a different workspaces, not necessarily at the workplace, even out here, then even when you're doing business. So when you look at the there is a convention called the United Nations Convention, which was enacted in 2019, and they talk about more into because the resultant of the violence will have a lot of effect to the psychological part of it, and also has a very big result to the economic part of any country. These are just type of the workplaces violence and harassment. One, you're looking at the physical aspect. And physical, that means could be any beating, kicking, slapping, stabbing, or perhaps even shooting or shoving. This is just physical. Then there is a psychological aspect. And the psychological means now there is a verbal abuse, there is mobbing, there is bullying, and then cyberbullying as well. Then violence, there is where you find there is manipulation of persons, you find maybe a clout issue. And there is a sexual violence and good issue. And there is a sexual violence and good procure means there is no consent, there is no agreement. And now finally we talk of the hostile environment, hostile working environment. This is just type of the workplace violence and harassment. So the continuation of that, it can cut across. So if you look in an organization, you will have the horizontal, that is peer-to-peer, one staff to their staff, or staff among staffs. Then there is a vertical, these are supervisors or the senior management toward the subordinate staff. And there is now the third party where means even clients at some point. You have also noted that in our conducting some assessments or workplace risk assessment, we find that harassment is that party find a client harassing a staff. So this, for example, it's a security officer who happen to be a male or female, and someone's come from the gate and they're told, well, you have to perhaps clean the house, and that is not their exact job. So that's what I mean by the third party operator. This is the client or the customers. So some of the psychological factors associated with workplace violence, harassment, one is because of job demands. That means the assignment is not matched to the knowledge and the skill. And this is very common. Workplace, they usually have, most companies will have policies, but still other staff do not really follow that. And these relationships can be vertical, can be horizontal, or a third party. Then you're looking at the leadership style. Not everyone who is called a leader, they are really leaders. And you'll find others will autocratic. It is my way or the highway. Then we have organizational justice. So the lack of policies or procedures. Should there be any report of violence, what the mechanism is there? Or whenever perhaps someone, a staff come, any report, then they find what? They're being discriminated or they are maybe pushed out of the organization. Then the organization changes, some companies keep on changing over and over, and staff perhaps at some point are not involved in that. And they end up having quite a lot of distress as well. Then the working environment, like currently you find some duties would be in a hostile environment. So these staff who are working, they are not well trained in that respect. So again, it's really about psychological problems to them. Other risks, you'll find again, and all these risks so we have talked about for the violence or the harassment, not only happen within the country. This is a global problem. because this is what has been picked out by International Labour Organization. Discrimination could be because of gender, or because again the age differences, the language of the nation, but just because we are expatriates, then they end up causing a lot of distress to the staff. Normalization of violence is no one really cares. Then workplace culture of bullying, and also you're looking at the case of drug and abuse, and I think this is one of the medical occupational diseases that we have, and we speak more about it later with Dr. Asper here, because when we're doing a medical exam, these are some of the problems that we find. Then groups of workers more vulnerable to violence. Age, in the case of the women, it could be the one again education bit, but not necessarily now only women, including even the men. If you look at that, you're looking at the working situation, which may increase the risk. What would increase the risk that you're exposed to the harassment is when you're working alone. And I'm sure you have had some organizational companies, this case being reported. Working in contact with the public. The other thing is working with people in distress. These working people in distress, perhaps they have a significant medical problem. And over the time, perhaps the family is keep on pressuring you. Then working with valuable of cash handling, these again increases the risk of being harassed. And again, there is a case of violence. Then working in isolated or remote location at evening or... Now, what is the impact of these workplace harassment violence? As you see, what tops the list is a victim. It can be any one of us. And the mental health problem is, if you're doing activities repeatedly, you end up getting all these conditions. Now, how we find these mostly, and we have come to find that, especially when we're conducting fitness to work medical exams, that's the only time we can find this. You may find someone is, like your staff is, every day they're complaining of a headache. They go to the clinic, tomorrow they come back, they tell you today, the following day they have stomachache. They go to the clinic, the next day they tell you they have a backache. But usually, until now, we go to the vet, that's where we find what could be the major problem, what is ailing this. So the other thing is a witness of the colleagues. That means detrimental effect on the mental health and the well-being. And it means all of us, we need to come together. Be it a senior management, be it subordinate, or whichever the level in an organization we are, including in our, at our homes, in our families. Then organization, again, we also need to have a budget. We need to have a budget that needs to be addressing this. Most of the organizations that we have also been called at some point in an emergency, we attend to patients, and at the end of the day, what we find is the organization did not have a budget to do medical exams. And which means in Kenya, in our country, is under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it is a mandatory. And when you have someone who is sick, and then you end up having work injury related, then they may break the equipment. What else comes in later, and this person needs to be taken to the hospital, the equipment, whatever they are broken, needs to be, refabricated or perhaps buying a new. So you can see all these costs, and yet would have been caught up early enough. Then you're looking at the society, costs related to the medical consultation and treatment, and other rehabilitation. So the society, because even if we work, whatever we work, we always go back to our community. You have your own family, 1 or 2, 3, 4 families, they make that society. So again, if our mental well-being is not taken care of, we also burden that, which means becomes a problem even to the national level. So what are some of the recommendations? The recommendation under the international labor laws, and mostly you can hear me talking of international labor laws, because that's where any state or any country, we brought all these platforms, or we ascribe to. And one of them is we need to respect, promote, and realize the rights of everyone in the world. Then adapt inclusive, integrated, and gender-responsive approach. There is a complementary laws on functions of government and employees. Usually this is what I would find in our country, what I would call occupational health and safety. It actually works as a triplet. You have one side is a government, one side there is an employer, and the other side there is an employee. So each one of us, we have a responsibility. The government sets up the standards, the staff, it's our responsibility, again, to follow those policies. Then I think also, again, like I mentioned, my colleague Dr. Asper will expound on some. Then there is adoption of laws and regulations to prohibit these, so that you can report it anonymously. Those companies also have adhered to that you can report any harassment anonymously, and no one will discriminate you against that. These are some of the conventions, and the service occupational diseases recommended, occupational diseases at workplaces. And majority of us, I know perhaps you have your medical insurances, but you're not aware, are they covered under your medical insurance or not? Some of us don't even know that. Then when you're sick, so that's usually a bit later. And some of them, like even cases of cancer. So this is something that we can cover early enough. And then you find at the national level, there are those frameworks that are already put into place. So it is our responsibility as companies, again, to have that we need to have occupational laws and regulations within our area of work. Then the labor inspectors, that's pretty much what we do now as auditors. I'll be sent to come and just check your organization and just do a risk assessment. Depending on what we find, give a report that goes back to the Ministry of Labor. That can now, they can decide either to close down your facility, or again, you have to actually now fix the problem that you have before you carry on with the business. And then we can capture that with education and training and raising awareness within our place of work. So if you look at the organization, occupational safety laws and regulations, so it is a responsibility of companies with good receipt. Other than have an application on the cell phone. Just take a photo or record and you send it to go to the cloud. Then there's a specific team that usually assess and get to go through all those complaints. Then protection from retaliation, and or perhaps because you may end up getting a mental health related due to the violence and the harassment at the workplace. Then what's the mechanism do you have in your organization? Do you have a standby counselor or psychologist that can address these problems? The national policies, I've just mentioned these, but in just to enforce on us, I don't know, most of the companies we have very, very good policies, but the problem comes into what? As a government, it's set up because there is the law that governs, and the government will work with approved persons, and mostly in the occupational health and safety. For your information, not any other doctor can give you a medical fitness to work certificate. They have to be approved and the Ministry of Labor. They must be approved. And actually this goes to the point of where they are gazetted. So you just go to the Ministry of Labor, which is now DOSH, Directorate of Occupational Safety and Services, and you're going to see all the listed, depending on where you are in the country. Those are the only people that can, those are the only doctors that can give you a clean bill of health, including now the auditors and also the trainers. Now, in respect to the training, I know there's so many training that we run, but in the current, in Kenya here we find majorly three major training that ought to be conducted. There is fire safety, there is first aid, and there is occupational health and safety. Those are strict directly under the Ministry of Labor. But again, the action is to adopt and implement, and with workers and the representations, then take into account the violence, harassment, and associated psychological risks. This is what this majorly is our biggest concern. Then what we do is just to have an integrated into broader workplace occupational health and safety policies. Please remember, there is a national platform, so again we need to reintegrate, and this is a continuous cycle that we keep on developing, that we develop and we keep on implementing. Then it has to be consistently applied and enforced. It doesn't matter whether, as long as you're within the territory of Kenya, then you ought to adhere to this. Then the other thing, how we can identify is by doing a risk assessment. Usually you can do an internal risk assessment as an organization. You have an independent department that does that, or alternatively now you consult the external provider to do that. And you can see also the recommendation where they're coming from, listed down there from the international labor laws. These are some of the examples of psychological health and safety at the workplaces. Then you can look at what do we need to do, factors to be assessed. You're looking at the psychological support, you're looking at this organizational culture, there is the leadership, there is the civility and respect, the psychological job demands, growth and development of staff. There is recognition and awards. Enoch has just mentioned, and now they mentioned about the awards. So I think this is part of the what we call intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. Yeah? So that can play on that point. Involvement and influence. Then workload management. Majority of us, we spend a lot of time at work, but we forget, maybe we have other sides like families. We also need to spend time with our friends. Then work, which means now like work-life balance. Then the protection from violence, from bullying and harassment. Those again all managed by the policies we have. This is just how to control. Again, it's the preparation of what I mentioned is how do we control the physical violence is by local having more alarms, or there is a training, or again create an awareness to staff so they feel empowered. That goes all the way to the psychological violence and harassment, and in case even the sexual harassment. These mostly lands were more self-awareness, and again, as you have created an awareness, do more as well training. What you see in this is just psychological risk in the workplace, and you can have it as a levels. So you have the organization, you have a workplace, animal, or you can downscale these. But you can see all the way there is case of rehabilitation, there is return to work, and there also training and conflict available through those contacts. And my colleague, if you have any question, we are here to answer that. I thank you, everyone.
Questions regarding workplace violence. Today we discuss 3 areas. And I mean, we want to go to sexual harassment and sexual violence. I already have one. It's coming your way. Do we have questions, comments in the audience that we can be able to take? As we do that, I want to invite Madam Eunice and Ms. Joyce at the time is here. Can we take questions and comments so that we can be able to get this discussion going? Any questions? Jamani, hamna maswali, kila tuko kazini. Yeah, we have many safety and security challenges touching on safety. We have our first question here.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Shafi Mohammed Hassan. I represent a company called Al Tayyib Cargo Limited, which I face through a lot in my warehouses. We have several warehouses in Nairobi, particularly ECD, Yara Plaza, first floor, office number 7. We have one office in Dubai, Jebel building, floor number 13, office number 98. Yes? Okay. Let me be brief. Number one, which, and I'm also, thank you, and I'm also glad to be here. So I have learned some 1, 2, 3 things from the occasion. Thank you very much.
Wow, I didn't seem to catch your question, but thank you for acknowledging the...
I'd like to thank the presenter. So my first question will go to the debaters about the accident register in the workplaces. Most of the time, as per the regulation, these are provided, but at the inspection level, I don't know how the inspectors engage in this register to identify whether these accidents are been recorded and whether they have been forwarded as per the regulation. Because most of the time we find that we have the auditors, not the government labor inspectors. But most of these works have been dedicated to like the guys who have been registered at ADOSH. So what is the force? See, now we are lucky abuse only guys, maybe during the access control. Guys banned from entering the place. So we have, secondly, now the safety of the staff. Here is a question of how do you address this one, the two of them, so that security also can have this work easy, so that they can implement some of these things.
I think Mr. Gitao, that is for you. Accident registry, issues of safety. I don't know whether you're ready with your answer.
Okay. Thank you for the question. In regard to registrations, this goes all the way back from the workplace registration. You cannot run any business in Kenya without it being registered. And also, it registers as a workplace, again, depending with the staff. So that is the benchmark. Now, the side of meaning, how do these inspectors come to your workplaces, is actually not the point of view to allow them to come. The first thing it is ought to be you to comply, and more so the case of occupational health and safety. Look into the risk assessment. They are what's called the occupational health and safety audit, and but you start with the risk assessment. Then from there, then once you have identified the hazard, then that's when you conduct that specific audit. Then the recommendation come into play. So if then that's not well worked on, that's where you have leeways of where now the government itself now coming and telling now they may shut it down. The next point of maybe the drugs related to the workplace, I'll have my colleague talk about it, Dr. Asman. She's my colleague and she can handle that the medical bit as well. Can you go on?
Before you answer, he needs to give a clarification.
Okay.
I needed to clarify, it's not talking about the accident register, right? At the workplace that are provided by another act. So to ask maybe the occupier or the organization how this was transmitted, right? So that's the issue. The accident register in workplaces, and then how is it transmitted and at what level I need to be audited and maybe enforced. Because most people they register the injury levels because we have what percentages of those injuries. But the question will come at maybe at the compensation, because we talked about the compensation issue. So how
workplace injuries.
Yes.
They are documented.
Yeah.
And his question is, at what point does the auditor look at those documentations and are recommendations as to workplace and safety that resulted in those injuries?
Registry that where you indicate what kind of an incident happened, especially if anyone has been involved. I know a case like, for example, you're having nosebleed. People would not think that nosebleed is a big problem. But so that means what? The compensation comes in. So now what happens in the next step we will get, after getting from the hospital, because these are just general medical practitioners, now you'll be moved to the designated medical practitioners who are registered at the Ministry of Labor. Like for example, Dr. Asma here. She will come now re-evaluate that in relation to the workplace. And that's how now they pick up the compensation. And they tell you now compensation will be about this margin, dependent and with the law as well. And I hope that I've answered your question. And perhaps, Dr. you can say something on that?
That's an answer. But IPC, then that will become. You talked about drug and substance abuse. And this will look in issues of mental health. There's a lot of issues of mental health, especially in the space of the security industries, whereby most of the employees will resort to substance abuse, and substance abuse has a cutoff. When you take 1 or 2 glasses of wine, it is you're not able to control the use of that substance. It is beyond your control in regard. In that issue, we usually look at what are the stressor factors that are existing within the workspace that will have resulted to this employee to move into substance abuse and then take habilitation for them to come back. So the drug abuse will fall under the mental health, of promotional of health mental issues, training, all the states of work who understand mental health, and all the other employees are just sensitized to understand what is that borderline. You find we understand the exposure of teams within the security space to pressures, stress, verbally, physically.
Safety and security manager, psychologist, I want to say that it is good for organizations if they can adopt policies and practices which address issues of mental health in the workplace. One way is to give this violence. In my organization, we have a policy for sexual harassment issues where every staff coming on board, he has to sign that policy. He has to read, understand, and say that he understood it. So it's It's like you are taking an oath, like saying that I'm committing working in this organization that will be able to observe certain regulations. So this affects, and also maybe to make it clear, once in a year, staff to come together, and then our speaker gave very good examples of what kind of harassment can happen in the office. You may or you are even charged because of abusing somebody. And when somebody asks you, what did you do? I just touched that person, but of course, without permission. So sometimes our staff do not understand what, since we say in this forum we are doing networking, it is somebody now we can engage and find further how our organization can help in that side. Thank you.
Mr. Kesewu, you are a safety and security manager, and our speaker talked about medical fitness to work certificates, which is a very critical component when it comes to managing hazards and safety at work. Do you think in your years of experience, it's something that is taken seriously or talk about and push for when it comes to managing safety at the workplace?
Yeah, to understand, you said medical fitness?
Yes, you said medical fitness to work certificates.
Okay.
Yes.
So when you talk of medical certificates, medical fitness, on the onset of being employed, I think organizations, well, mostly all, they require for a certificate of fitness, where you have to go to a doctor to certify that you are fit to be able to work. So I think any organization worth its salt and are serious in terms of that, this should be a policy which should be enforced, that before you are taken on board, you have a certified medical certificate from a certified medical doctor to show that you are fit to be able to work. It will also affect your efficiency in the workplace, in the sense that sometimes you might be deployed, in the organization you might be required to be deployed out in the field. And going out in the field, and maybe you have what we may call an inherent disease which was not discovered, like diabetes or high blood pressure. And when you are deployed in a certain field, you say you will not be able to work. And yet you did not declare from the very beginning that this is what I'm suffering from. We are not saying that we exclude people who have got this disease and for your staff to be physically fit. Because of deployment, you know very well that in the security field, we are deployed in many areas where it will require your intellect, your physical fitness, also to be able to work. So it is important, even when you are employed security guards, I don't think you'll be comfortable having a security guard who can easily collapse when he is put to extreme conditions. So it is important that we have this in board.
Thank you for that input. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to give a brief introduction to my other panelists, Madam Eunice Itonye, who is a seasoned journalist. She's also an award-winning content producer, a digital and TV expert. So this morning she's here to also chip in onto the discussion area or security risks on investigative journalists. So I'm very keen to know, Madam Eunice, from you, from a sexual harassment perspective, what are some of the challenges?
Have been taught, or we've been told that sexual harassment is mainly physical, but it comes, like my colleagues have said, it comes in non-verbal ways, it comes in verbal ways, and now even with technology, it's even worse because it's happening in the digital platforms where you may not necessarily be concerned, but it gets to you. It gets to you on mobile phones, it gets to you on your TV, it gets to you on someone who knows this person. You share something as small as an emoji on your WhatsApp to troll somebody else sexually. They may look like small things, but those non-verbal
everyone.
Morning.
My name is Rogers Kinoti. I'm a seasoned investigator, and I'm happy to be here today. I will be a little bit gender biased, and I want to talk about us men. With the coming of My Dress, My Choice, don't you see that we men are the people who face a lot of sexual harassment and women in workplace and the society? That is one. Number two, we have effects in our companies from what do we call company setup. We have what we call team building every year, quarterly, and we mingle, and sometimes chemistry happens. Maybe I'm not married, she's not married, I am married, I need second wife, maybe. Because with our brothers and sisters in Muslim, you are allowed to marry up to 4, so long as the manager, for God's sake, maybe. And I've seen a lady, very smart, and the chemistry is working between the two of us. It becomes sexual harassment, it becomes workplace, an ethical workplace thing, but we are now husband and wife. How do we categorize that? Number 3, policy issues. I think we have a problem in this country, and this problem should be addressed well by all these organizations. I will not be happy today to be a friend of Monica, to be a friend of Makanga, if things are not running. I'll be very disappointed to be here today. I learn the people who are supposed to run the show are doing nothing about it. Why? We have very big companies. They have security manager, and they think security manager will cater for all these things. He's the one who is investigating sexual harassment. He's the one who is investigating theft, embezzlement of funds in an organization. And I think with big organizations like chemical industries, we need to have officers, and it should become a policy where we have OSHA officers being employed, so that at least when I sit down as a manager, a security manager, I still have somebody, we can still sit in a panel and maybe disagree to agree on something, and maybe come up with a very good standard operating procedures for the company. I therefore dare say that the occupational safety health need to implement policies. That is on the other part of my comment. Other is for Madam Investigative Journalist. I really want you to handle the first part of my question. My dress, my choice, and that will be served as well. Thank you.
All right, before she answers that question, I think there's the issue of policy that has been able to be raised, that we have challenges here and there to see how our view as ladies, views of men, and how at a policy level organizations are able to deal with some of those things. So panelists, please think about it as I take my second and final question before you close this session. His hand was up before yours, so let him go first.
My name is Bill Zawie, and I'm from Liberia, but I school in Rwanda. My first question, what are those? The second question, what are some signs employers should look out for that might indicate a workplace violence? The last question is, what are some methods used to identify risks during risk assessment? Thank you.
Indicators of workplace violence, risk assessment, workplace violence. Panelists, I hope you're taking your questions. And my final question, then we can close this session.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Blessed Bernard Wonderful Wesonga, representing Opticom Kenya Limited. We design and deploy integrated security solutions using technology and innovation, with the sole aim of increasing the ease of doing business, increasing efficiencies, reducing risks, and saving costs for businesses. This topic is quite interesting at this particular moment, and it comes just days after we've celebrated the World Day for Safety and Healthy at Work. That was last Friday on 28th of April, a day that is celebrated every year on Saturday. Now, the beauty and the most interesting part of this topic, even as we're discussing it now, I know it's not a conversation that has begun now, it has been going on. But the milestone that was made in this year's celebration of World Safety is safety and health at workplaces has now become a fundamental principle and right at work. But then comes just the challenges of enforcing that. When I just suppose this is what my brother was asking and actually requesting the lady to respond on, basically tells us that a lot of what we call safety and unhealthy, unsafe and unhealthy workplaces or activities take place in most organizations, and 100%, actually majority of which are never reported. So maybe just to pose a question to the panelists and also our medical experts, how do you foresee the implementation and the execution and the effectiveness of the right and the principle of safe and workplaces? And what are some of the measures that can actually be done to bring not really justice, but just at least fairness in the workspaces, so to limit and to have more exposure into this, because many of these activities happen unrecorded, unattended to, and even at the end of it, some actual employees may become victims of such activities. So I'm just posting that at the basis of being a fundamental principle and right at work, which has been added under one of the international organization rights. Thank you.
Wow, I think the audience is energized. Panelists, the audience is energized, and this comes a day after Labor Day. Simply our Vatican, when they are talking about their safety issues. So there's an array of questions that have come, and this goes to all of you. So I'll pick each of your brain to be able to answer the three. Please go safety in organizations.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for your questions. You realize all of us, we have a specific need of being. Now, they said as an employer, they have a responsibility to take care of the staff. Then also as a staff, we have also responsibility to follow what is laid down. Now, I come back to the case of occupational health and safety policies. Majority of companies, the reason why this seems like a bit new to some of us is that they didn't actually know that there is a cadre for those who go and specialize in occupational health and safety. In universities, they didn't know that. And it has become at a specific line. So you have someone who understands now the workplace hazards, and also they are able to identify and come up with the right policies in line with the national occupational health and safety. The twist in that is you'll find most companies just peg that docket to the HR, human resources, which is a bit of small segment in their line of work. Yes, it's part and parcel, but you need also to have someone specialized. Remember, you have to have competencies and the skills. So the reason why you're having deficit is, again, we talked about the job demand and the placement. So if that is not checked the right way, then you end by having a lot of these problems. Then how do you identify the workplace harassment and sexual harassment? Well, there is no cast in stone says that this is how you see it, but it's now by having the policies. One, you have both male, female, or the kind of the outlook of staff you have. Then you ought to have the policies not only that are higher only within the national, because if you look at the presentation we started from the International Labour Organization, they set the standards. Then that state country also they have those standards. Then it is the responsibility of the employer also to enhance to the same so that they can be in tandem, all of them to work harmoniously. Just like what my colleague had mentioned, like for example, you could have a policy that says you cannot have a sexual relationship as long as in a company. This happened to some of the organizations. If it is a sexual relationship that you say, like for example, a colleague mentioned that you have a mutual feeling, especially some of the, I'm working in a critical care, we have a patient there, we have to resuscitate. Areas might not be really be encouraged, but if you encourage it, then there has to be a specific policy. Perhaps you cannot work in the same department, but not, you go out, or you can be in the same company, but perhaps not in the same department. That can try to help on that. The other point I know my colleague will expound more is, like for example, she mentioned about the text messages and perhaps, so again, you ought to have as an organization have a policy that can also try to cap that. Then what are the repercussions should you be called either from the vertical side as a senior manager and you're the junior manager. So you need to have a holistic way on how to run it. So again, as we said, yes, policies, again, we have them, but unless you implement and enforce them, they just become very good document, and it is not something that we can work with. I think that's what I can respond on, and my colleagues can pick it up.
Yes, on that, Mr. Kiseo.
Thank you. I just want to take up from where our main speaker talked about the chemistry, the question you asked about what do you do when employees now there is a sexual attraction, and this can be a security issue. Good practices organization can borrow is that, for example, in my organization we say that you say feelings are neither bad nor wrong, but it's what you do with those feelings. One of the way we mitigate against that is the HR department advises that where there is an attraction and you feel that you have a relationship, maybe love has blossomed, then you declare. Let the HR department know that this is my girlfriend, or this is somebody I want to have a serious relationship with. So when you have declared, then it is known that so and so they are friends or they have a relationship, so that it does not interfere with the work, with your work schedules. Also, another way you can also mitigate that is just like the previous speakers talked about, maybe to be encouraged to work in a different department. If your organization has maybe different workplaces, one can go and work in the other place. Because sometimes when you are together, it can actually affect your concentration and focus. So that's one way you can mitigate, to declare so that people know that, yes, this is so and so, and not the fact that in the office I have this friend. Sometimes it can bring fights, where you know that this is my girlfriend, but the other person, the other staff member is also talking to that person. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kiseo. I think your answers are coming very well. I am liking the conversation. And the issue of relationships at work, I think that is what you're talking about. Relationships at work. It is important to declare, because I think if you don't, what she talked about, trolling, people who know about it, then start trolling you on it. So maybe before she speaks, this is the topic that everybody is talking about. What is your comment that you can finalize with Madam?
My views are the same. If you feel you have feelings for your desk mate, you need to declare, so that when you look at her in the office, you understand that you're in a relationship, then the HR ensures that you're not assigned together, because clearly you wouldn't actually live. So bottom line, you just need to declare. And let me also just take this opportunity to answer the other questions you had about my industry choice. I think every corporate company has a policy about dress code in the office. So it's for you to tame yourself as a man. So if your employees, you feel they're not adhering to the dress code, report about it. And if they are, and you just last call, you need to tame yourself.
Madam, your turn.
I think there's one question that has not been answered about the issues of violence. And you find there are a lot of issues at workplace that can result in violence. One of the most common is post-traumatic, especially for employees that has gone through a post-traumatic event and it was not well addressed. This particular event can actually cause a lot of issues with fights and all that in the workspace. There's also issues of substance abuse. And this can easily be picked, where you can see a once vibrant person who is jolly has started being quiet or is always drinking, comes in late. So when you pick this, you know, they might actually end up being violent within the workspace. Some of the other things that I don't know if we as employers notice, that sometimes job insecurity can actually push somebody to be a bit harsh because that fear, that stress, that pressure of not knowing if they're still there. An issue of job categorization or long working hours, where an employee who has been employed feels like they're given to do things that they're not skilled to do them, or they're not cut off, or they're made to do a lot of work and they're not able to voice it out. So, as we say, if you push somebody to the wall, they will actually react. And you find such employees devote mostly to violence within themselves. And this can be big. If it's physical violence, you can actually see the sign, the bruises and all that. Or you can see a person who stops coming to work, comes in late, or becomes upset. And the only way you can actually address violence within the workspace is to ensure you create some safe space. Safe space is not only for sexual harassment, it's also to allow the employees to voice what they think. Even the team building, which somebody would, it might actually lead to sexual harassment or having temptation. But team building helps a lot for somebody to whine or to just debrief whatever is pumped up in their body. And work-life balance, whereby the employee proactively ensure that their employees can actually talk or explain, or they can balance their life and their work without stress. If there are a lot of overtime, then definitely this will be a stress, because this particular person, if they are married, if they have kids, it will be only one partner who is catering to the family, yet the other partner is always at work. And feedback mechanism, it is important. I know we have a lot of suggestion box within our workspace. I don't know how many of us actually open them, read them, and address those suggestion box. I don't know how many of us actually have the privacy that is supposed to come with a suggestion box. Is it the same supervisor who is looking, or is it an external team within the workspace that is the one who supervises the... Because I can imagine if I put a statement talking about my employer, and it's the same employer who is reading it, then I will definitely get a backlash from that employer, or I'll be victimized. So we need to have those suggestion box, or devise an anonymous way of having a feedback loop mechanism where employees can talk what they really feel, even will address the issue of sexual harassment. Like if I feel whenever I come, you keep on talking about my hijab, or you take a picture of me when I remove my hijab, I will definitely be uncomfortable. So if I'm able to voice it out and tell, because if I go directly to HR, they will know it is me who's talking about it. But if I can have somebody else where I can put in a suggestion box, or if it's an online or digital platform where we can report that I'm not feeling comfortable because so-and-so does 1, 2, 3 whenever I pass across or whenever I come. So I think issues of violence need to really be addressed within the workspace so that people can be more productive, and both the employee and the employer can benefit from that relationship.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of this panel discussion, I just want to make a few pointers that may be our takeaways for this morning. Number one, as described by Mr. Gitao, is that it is very, very important to have workplace safety and security audits to mitigate some of those problems that may occur in organizations. Another aspect that has come out very clearly is that much as we used to say as security people, that there's a clear distinction between HR and security, I think now we are being told there's a clear difference between safety, security, and HR. that HR needs to categorize those two. How do you manage those? So let's take very keen that it's very important for us to be very keen on medical checkups for our staff, whether we have medical covers or not. It is a self-care aspect for all of us. And then feedback is very important, because then this is where we are able to improve on our challenges and be keen on the indicators of workplace violence. How do you respond to an angry customer? You know, how do you notice when an employee is changing, attitude change? How do you pick some of those issues that may affect workplace safety and security? Ladies and gentlemen, I take this opportunity to thank you for taking your time to discuss workplace violence. Mr. Gitao, you are the lead on this conversation. We appreciate your input. I welcome you to go back to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please give our panelists a hand of applause for a good job this morning as we move into our next segment. Is it still morning or afternoon? This afternoon. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. All right, I will ask all of us to, stretch a little bit. Yeah, let's be upstanding. I know the first session has been quite engaging. All right, I know. Imagine there's a mango on your left. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. All right, there's another one on your right. Yes, some of them have dropped down. Pick them up, and then take your seats. Take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. All right, as we await our next speaker, I will ask that we maintain our quiet. Ladies, I hope you've been able to get the exhibition booklet that we have. All right, so that we can go to look at our program and we go to the next segment. We are not going to talk about cybersecurity in Africa. We are going to move on to national security in the face of emerging global threats. And this is a topic that is very critical to our country at the moment. Yes, we just had demonstrations yesterday, and the country is struggling with not being affected with those demonstrations as they adapt to be peaceful. But really, what are the security challenges that come along with some of those things that come? And this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, our second speaker is going to be Mr. Dinano Kilu. And Mr. Kilu wears many hats, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said in the morning, he is the Secretary General of the Protective and Safety Association of Kenya. He is also the Secretary General of the Private Security Congress, which is a conglomeration of security associations in Kenya. He is also the SG, I think we need to just name you SG, Wanakiru, for the Kenya Security and Safety Federation, all right? And then he is a PR director. Communication is second nature to this great gentleman. He is the coordinator, director, Kenya International Police Organization. To the podium, Mr. Dinano Kilu. Karibu sana.
Our Secretary General for Women in Safety Excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're having a good time and that this Nairobi Security Expo is turning out slightly different from what you expected. I don't hear any yes or no. Now, you see me, I'm in security, so now I'm going to start picking volunteers. Karibuni sana. This is going to be your most important presentation of the Expo. I can say that without any shadow of a doubt. I doubt many of you have gone through specific national security presentations. If you have, just raise your hand so we can properly identify you. You see, we have very few people who have actually done that. The reason is national security is a sensitive matter, and most of this is kept very close to the chest. So in today's presentation, by the time you come out from here, you will be partially a global expert on national security. Partially. The rest, somebody said, is best caught, not taught. The rest is best caught, not taught. So hang on to anybody who is in those spheres of influence, and you will be a very happy person. Now, before we step into and hospitality, come back to your seats as you go through the presentation. Don't be very shy about that. And then immediately after me, I'm standing between you and lunch. You can have lunch after that. But for now, as we embark on this journey, I want you to fasten your seatbelts because it's going to be quite an interesting discussion. We all know, we see it in the news every single day. We hear about it on social media. All the alerts that come to our phones through people, we know that there's a lot going on around the world. But what is our position? How do we handle it? You cannot handle something that you cannot understand. And authority to be able to walk you through the dynamism of global security in the face of national security and in the face of emerging global threats. So as I walk you through this presentation, of course, my first job is to properly introduce myself. I am a level 3 security officer with the International Police Organization that is headquartered out of Italy, and that is an official role that requires, of course, a lot of vetting, etc., for you to be able to be appointed to such a position. I am in charge of Africa Command as one of the directors, and we support police forces across the country. We support the work of security. We are not actively involved, we just provide the necessary, can be part and parcel of what is happening from a security community perspective. I also am appointed as Royal General No-Mark, that is of one of the sovereignties, and that's an official role that I carry in my capacity. I also am the High Commissioner for Diplomacy. I'm Secretary General for IOC RSCI. This is an important organization involved in peace building in places like Yemen, Sudan, even before the conflict began, and a lot of other places. I'm an appointed pinned ambassador for National Counterterrorism Center, PROSAC Secretary General, which I'm very proud of, as we host and support you in this place over here. We've already talked about IPO. International VIP Bodyguard headquartered out of the United Kingdom. I am the Secretary General for Africa and Private Security Congress, which is all the associations in Kenya coming together as one voice. And they appointed me as Secretary General, as well as Kenya Safety and Security Federation, which was formed through KEPSA member bodies that said we need to have our security people together. So I also serve as Secretary General for that. And outside of security, I'm also a director as a volunteer professional for Kenya Olympians Association. So we rub shoulders with all the Olympians you know since Kenya's independence, one of the things that we like to do. So that's me also over there shaking hands with our last former president. And the new president is right behind that. I'm also one of the organizers for the National Prayer Breakfast. I like pictures. You know, pictures make the presentations a bit more interesting than a lot of words. I also do some development projects, some in the South Coast. And this one is very interesting. So for all your HR-related and future tags on your employees and staff members, if in a mandamano, you want to know where are all my people, are they safe? We have a big security risk in the country. Just go to gigsasa.com. This is our baby, this is our IT, and you can download a free trial of gigsasa.com. And GigSasa is a platform which you can, for free, deploy to your employees for you. I broach the subject of national security, having introduced my authorities. A long time ago, in that picture that you see over there, there's two pictures. One is in hieroglyphics and one is in Akkadian. There was the Egyptian-Hittite peace treaty. And the Egyptian-Hittite peace treaty is the most ancient version of a peace treaty. And it's the earliest example of an international agreement of any kind. And it followed the Battle of Kadesh, which was fought some 16 years earlier. This was actually signed between Ramesses the Great, who was the pharaoh of Egypt, who there's actually almost no ancient site in Egypt that does not mention him. And why is this? Because the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE is absolutely legendary, among his greatest moments as a pharaoh. However, not because it was an act of war, but because it was an act of peace. He signed the very first peace treaty in recorded human history. And it's known as the Treaty of Meselim, between the Mesopotamian cities of Umma and Lagash. And scholarly, It's a treaty of delimitation, but the treaty of Meselin is actually a written agreement between the gods of Umma. 1258 BCE holds that, says that they did this, but it's very, very important. They experience things that till today the tourists still go to look at. And this is what is important, is that buildings of kingdoms, buildings of empires, building of state nations can only happen in times of peace. Is there anything you remember from today's presentation? Remember that. It's only during a time of peace. So we move over a bit to the West Coast and Ghana. We used to call it Wakadi. Between the period of 300 to 1235, there was the Ghanaian Empire. It was rather large. It's now what you call southeastern Mauritania, western Mali, and Senegal. It was a very large kingdom, not what we see today. But its economic development and wealth was linked to the growth of the regular trans-Saharan trade in gold, salt, and ivory. It was an empire state capital. That developed, eventually it fell. And then came one of the most interesting kingdoms on the of 10,000 men. Very formidable fighting force. And he grew and doubled to make a 4,000-mile pilgrimage to Mecca and to give the rest of the world a chance to see his generosity. And along the way, he gave gifts of gold that destabilized the entire Egyptian economy. Just because he was carrying so much gold, he was able to destabilize the economy of Egypt. He was very generous, and his generosity literally put him on the map. He contributed more to create a map where it shows the continent of Africa, and it actually shows an African king that is on that continental map. That was Mansa Musa, that powerful. But like all kingdoms, Mali rose, Mali fell. The consequences. What are the consequences of the rise of kingdoms? Well, I also am an architect by nature, cloud computing architect, but I do a lot of architecture, not only in technology, but business architecture, by what we call regional economic communities. I know a lot of people like to call them regional economic blocks, but it's actually regional economic communities, such as IGAD. Right now, with the crisis in Sudan, war breaking out between the factions, and who have the authority to speak into it is IGAD. And the chair is Salva Kiir, currently South Sudan. And just yesterday, somebody was saying, Delano, wow, what a change, what a toppling of things. That South Sudan are the ones who are brokering and intervening in the peace affairs of Sudan. So the history of Africa, one of our very friends at the top to that building, the ground shook, literally. Anniversary tower. I got onto the roof and I looked across, and this is the scene I saw, but this is a bit later. The scene I saw was a black mushroom cloud emerging around the US embassy area and the cooperative bell-bottom house, and papers flying all over the sky. And I said, wow, we've been hit. And immediately we got back into the command center and started trying to talk to Kenya Police at the time. Now, Kenya Police were not available on two-way radio. Kenya Police has a secure network on radio, but if everybody starts trying to talk on radio at the same time, it becomes a problem. Because so many emergencies were being reported and so many issues were being reported, the system broke down. From our command center, we coordinated the emergency and security response with regards to the US Embassy bomb blast. Enoch Makanga was there later as a bomb expert to look into the investigations of that field. Some of our good friends, the first response from any country was from Israel. Some of our good friends till today, came immediately, almost immediately, just a very short while after this. But why is national security important, especially here in Kenya? Is in order to avoid people taking a one-ton truck full of TNT and trying to detonate that against defenseless human targets and taking innocent Kenyan lives. So the reason why we focus on peace treaties, regional economic blocks, why is it important? Why is it valuable? is so that we can avoid this kind of thing. Here on this planet that are so well protected, but it's almost completely invisible. You don't know that the protection is there, but it exists in the national security framework. If you took the same form that is here and you travel to Israel, Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion Airport, the most protected airport in the world, you'll see a large building with glass and a lot of things. And if you detonated this outside that airport, nobody which protects their national security if such a thing was supposed to happen. So we learn as we go along and we try to be a bit more proactive. Moving on, I talked about regional economic blocks. It's important that we support our communities. Some of our members from PROSAC are actually appointed. They relocated. They're in Addis Ababa, working closely with the African Union, working with inspector generals from countries across the African continent, because we chose that we want to work with one another. By working out by ourselves and pretending to be the be-all, end-all, it's not going to help us in national security. We have to work cohesively with our regional bodies to prevent further harm. This we see very well in Somalia. You see, Somalia has been a place of conflict, but because the regional bodies work together in your neighboring countries, in your neighboring continent, learn from one another. From a poll that was done not too long ago, that says, what are people worried about? They're worried about security, they're worried about their state, in other words, the country that they live in, they're worried about nuclear war, people are worried about power. Who has power? As national security, we have to be a bit strategic. We have to look at what are the priority areas, what do we need to address as a priority, what comes secondary, what comes tertiary, and what falls below that. So you have to be constantly aware, which means you have to work with your communities from the grassroots to be able to pick the sentiment analysis, to be able to pick real, existing, or future. At this particular slide that I'm presenting right here, I decided, because of the sensitivity of national security in Kenya at the current moment, we will talk about Nigeria. If you look at Nigeria, Nigeria faces a huge array of problems. It has Boko Haram, it has kidnapping, it has militants, it has criminal gangs, it has herder-farmer-related violence, it has piracy, and it has security spots. You can see we've painted them into different colors across the entire country of Nigeria. So when you're looking at national security, it's always the big picture, but you take the big picture and then you cascade that down to the threats, and then you look at those areas, and then you begin to analyze how do we defend against that. If we look at this from a continental perspective, we can see that on the continent of Africa, there's a rising threat of terrorism. This is a big issue. I picked this from the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, but you can see there's a big threat across the continent with a lot of hotspots across the coast, west coast, we can see east coast, we can see quite a lot also in the north. And we see even recently, even places like Uganda have experienced threats. Again, another threat for us from a national security perspective, you might not think of it as such, but it's the migrant crisis. Migrant crisis means everybody is saying, I give up on this place, I'm packing my bags and going. That means you have brain drain, because a country's biggest asset is its people. So the migrant crisis is not only a problem here, but what happens is when these people go abroad, they learn new things. Sometimes they become radicalized on that side, and then they want to come home and destroy the place that did not give them a chance. So migrant crisis is indeed something that has to be addressed from. It also bolsters criminal networks, because somebody will go over there, then a friend here who is in a criminal gang says, oh, by the way, you're in where? Condition which permits the citizens of a state to go about their daily business confidently, free from fear, and able to make the most of opportunities to advance their way of life. It encompasses the preparedness, protection, and preservation of people and of property and information. National security is the condition which permits the citizens of a state to go about their daily business confidently, free from fear, and able to make the most of opportunities to advance their way of life. It encompasses the preparedness, protection, and preservation of people and of property and information, both tangible and intangible. It has 7 key objectives which underpin a comprehensive concept of national security. 1, preserving sovereignty and territorial integrity. 2, protecting lines of communication. 3, strengthening international order to promote security. 4, sustaining economic prosperity. 5, maintaining democratic institutions and national values. 6, ensuring public safety. 7, protecting the natural environment. Those are the 7 key objectives. And we could go into a very long layer of describing what those 7 objectives, we could actually break that down, but I'll keep it very brief because we have a lot more to go through in this presentation. How do we drive this as a country? Every country must have what is called a national security policy, just like security policy. What does a national security policy do? It drives and defines the orange portion over there, which is the defense and security policies, which further drive the yellow bar over there, which is defense and security planning, which further drives the light green, which is defense and security management, and then the green, which is implementation, national security doctrine, because it's a framework. It describes the country, how it provides security for the state and its citizens. And it's a formal description of a country's understanding of its guiding principles, its values, its interests, its goals, its strategic environment, threats, risks, and challenges in view of protecting and promoting national security. So, how do we draft a national security strategy? I know some of you are sitting very far, you might not be able to see that, but as I've said, pick the slides from Hillary. You can go through the slides. The first thing you do is formulate and prioritize core national security values and objectives, assess the threats and assign responsibilities, align national security architecture to the needs, adapt democratic control and oversight of that structure that you've created, guide resource allocation, management, and partnerships, and last but not least, establish mechanisms and processes for implementation of a typical example from the US of what happens, of how that national security policy can be drilled down to the national strategy plan and further to the operations of the foot soldier on the ground and what their weapon looks like and how it is layered over time. So from the far left of the slide, you can actually see the evolution of the weapon on a national security policy and strategy. That's how it works. So you don't just say, oh, nimeona item pale China, nafikiri itakuwa mzuri. No, you actually have to have a clear understanding of what your threats and risks are, and then you address it, and you can address it down to the layer of your individual soldier. So it doesn't just come up with the framework. I like what I saw Korea using, or I like what I saw, somewhere in Haiti. No, you actually have to do it in a more intelligent way when you're addressing national security. Beyond that, let's take a look, peek. Let me give you a glimpse into the intelligence and national security of a country you might know called Russia. On the left-hand side, you see the pillar on the left says security. It's addressed at a mega level, the big level, which is global and international. It's then addressed at a macro level and regional. It's then addressed at what we call a meso level, M-E-S-O, meso level, which is regional, municipality, local, like our counties. And then it's addressed at a micro level, business entities, small social groups, and individuals. And coming to that, by the way, if you're participating in this conference, please feel free to talk to anybody from Hillary to the PROSAC stand out there. If you're not already on a security WhatsApp group, you can register at the PROSAC stand, and we can put you into a security WhatsApp group, because national security is addressed by knowing. There's a famous saying that says, my people perish because of lack of knowledge. So you need to be on our WhatsApp groups for alerts or advice or verification, because a lot of people post things on the internet. If you don't know this is true or this is not true, you could make a wrong decision that could hurt lives. So register at the PROSAC desk behind there, and we could put you into a group. So that's essentially how Russia has layered its intelligence. And it looks at various levels. It looks at systemic level. It sees security as an integral, complex, open system. It also looks at discrete. It considers security as a kind of qualitative state. It looks at potential, which considers security as a set of object properties and determines the ability to defend its values and interests. It looks also at the contextual aspect of security. It considers security as conditions that exist. So there's a lot of that works, and dynamically, there's a lot of layers in security. But if we go one step further, we can look at the structure for intelligence and national security in Russia. We're just using Russia as an example. Over here, you have various pillars. On the left, we have the political, military, informational, spiritual and moral and scientific and technological. And on the right, we have the economic, social, demographical, ecological, and innovation. All that is what we call typological national security. Then we have what is called hierarchical, or in other words, categories or layers. Federal level security, regional level security, and municipal level. Then on the right side, we have external security, global level, regional level, of collecting information. They actually have an intelligence collection structure that looks at these various ways, and then they have organizations that are responsible and accountable to collect that information. The first one on your far left is open source information that's collected by DNI and OSC. The second is human intelligence, or HUMINT, that's collected by the CIA. And then there's measurements and signature intelligence, which is collected by the DIA. And then there's signals intelligence, SIGINT, which is collected by the NSA. And then there's imagery intelligence, that's from up in the sky. And then we have a group that we probably, much like Kenya. We then have technology on the blue side of that circle. And then we have mission execution. So they're using a fusion-defined structure in the US for national security. That was developed, and that is what is taught at the US Naval War College. So we look at that and we talk about something that is now called the National Security Enterprise. So you ask yourself, Delano, you're talking all these things, nations and NGOs and umbrella organizations and trade associations, much like PROSA. We all play our role in the deployment and the development of national security. So I don't want to keep you between you and lunch. I just thought that it would be important that I might just give you a quick injection, a little bit of a flavor of what truly national security means. We right now have various threats that have emerged. Some of them are non-tangible, because you're to hack Safaricom and change the codes, admin codes, and you no longer have Fuliza and Pesa, you no longer pay salaries to your guards or whatever it is, that affects you directly. So that's a threat. So there are some that are all type of national security, like just this week, we saw Sunday night coming to Monday, Russia sent out a huge amount of aircraft, bomber aircraft, Tu-95s, Tu-160s, and before we used to be able to easily identify a terrorist. Now we have domesticated terrorists. They are the bigger threats. Because now the place of safety, which we thought was safe, the church is a big threat. Look at what is happening in Mavueni, in Malindi. Bodies buried all over the place. If that was a terrorist attack and we said 100 and something people have died there, is that not a threat to national security? So the threats are changing and they're emerging in different ways. And the only way that we can improve is by our intelligence systems improving our dynamic build of national security policies which address threats both emerging as well as future. There are regional threats. What happened in Sudan? Sudan was, everything was very fine until it was not. Now there are big problems. America is still trying to evacuate 16,000 citizens that were in Sudan. It's managed a few thousand, but not all. Others are moving out. Right now, there are some of our members who are not here because they're busy evacuating people from Sudan, which was a very stable state. Remember in my presentation, we actually talked about the economy. Did you know that keeping the economy strong is part of national security? So of course you have your democratic right to protest and to do all those kind of things. And that is all. Then we look at you in a different way. We start looking at you in a bit of a different way. If it's just the bumps and the normal whatever, like election period or people are not happy or that, but if we see that there's a determined strategic action to take down the economy of the country, then it's a national security threat and it has to be addressed. So we're going to begin to see globally, as well as here in Kenya, a lot of things that are going to be addressed, specifically in order to retain the protection of citizens, in order to protect the state and its natural environment, in order to protect. Did you know, for example, that there's a portion of Kenya, somewhere in the south of Kenya, that has one specific location with 600 lions on it? 600 lions. Now that may not be an important fact to you, but there are some of our brothers who come from the other side of the world, the eastern part of the world, and they like to have things like lion claws, lion teeth, lion hides. They believe it gives them some spiritual powers. So when they hear about that, they want to come and get your lions, which you are very happy. It's part of your natural wealth. Anyway, I just wanted you to think. I wanted you to think. So the purpose of today's presentation, and thank you for coming to Nairobi Security Expo, is for you to think, so that when you leave here, you go empowered and you step out with confidence into the world, knowing that I might not know all, but if I hang around a couple of people who might know a little more, and if I talk to people really strong, and be able to protect our national security, and we will be able to stand in a modern, a future, and a developed world. It has been my pleasure taking you through this presentation. My name is Delano Kiilo, and I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Mr. Kiilo a round of applause. He has been able to take us through, I think, awards. From a historical perspective, to a global perspective, regional, and even the local perspective. And national security keeps changing. Sindio, before Westgate 2011, terrorism was not a thing that we thought could happen in Kenya. Before the bomb blast, we were like sitting pretty dealing with local challenges. But what has happened? What has happened? Yes, now we are dealing with global challenges. COVID was here, we were clueless the first few months, but you know, we were able to mitigate. As we speak, it's no longer a national threat as it was. We've been able to manage the disease. And now we are having Ukraine crisis affecting our economy. Yes, and when the economy is affected, security becomes an aspect. The security officers are dealing with mandamano kila siku sababu ya nini? Sindio, food security, yes, and it boils down from a global perspective coming down to the local perspective. So this afternoon, we have been able to be taken through the critical aspects of national security, even as local companies. How does that affect how we look at business? How do you prepare to deal with global challenges that come as a result of these kind of aspects? Are we ready to be able to deal with such cases? So Mr. Kiilo is here. He's ready to take some questions because I know it's a lunch break is here. I'll take at least 3 questions at most. Then we can go to break for lunch and come back in the afternoon. Dr. Katana, please join the panel, Mr. Kiilo, so that you can be able to assist him in answering some questions touching on national security. But as you come to the podium, I would like to pick your brain and know what do you conceptualize national security to be in the face of global emerging threats, and take a moment to also introduce yourself.
Good afternoon all. My name is Leonard Katana. I'm focusing on personal security as a consultant. Although the moderator said Dr. Katana, but I'm a doctor in waiting. I'm a doc, still in the University of Kenyatta University. And I've also been interested in personal security. I've done a number of research in this country. Some who want to Google, they can see the latest one was on influence of social economic adversity on personal security. which is I also have a journal in it. So as we continue, we should be able to speak. So I've also been a police officer. Maybe some of you can see this face. I've been in charge of traffic in this city for years. I've been a regional police commander in Nyanza for some few years also. Then finally I was the director of quality assurance, Kenya Police Service. Thank you.
All right. Wow. I think we are dealing with serious personalities who really understand the cause of security in Kenya. So maybe to just take your questions, and as they take questions, Mr. Sana, maybe you just share and what Mr. Kilu has been able to share. What do you think that is the impact of global threats at a local level?
Can I start from the beginning where I started as a presenter? I want to appreciate the presentation of national security. And it's very important you as a non-state security officer, because it is not only the state which can be able to address security in any state. So basically you have a lot to do, you have a law as non-state actors, and remember nowadays, globally it has changed from the traditional way of security up to human security, and I've said that because of specializing in personal security, I'm very much concerned about human security, human rights and development, because this was globally we are really interlinked. So basically talking about the threat, there are many threats. In security, human security has 7 dimensions, and most of us only look at different areas. So in that dimensions, I'm talking about personal security, I'm really concerned about security, we talked in the morning, concerned about workplace security. There are areas like environmental security, which most of us don't take a lot of interest, like the climate change phenomena recently. We have talked about the droughts, which have been there. Now we have rains, we don't know how to harvest water. And then eventually come back. Sometimes I challenge the NGOs around that when we wait for a disaster to take place, then we mitigate. Why don't we come up with a protective or a prevention measure before that, like the droughts recently? Why don't we wait until we come and start putting out, giving out food and all these things? Why don't we have a source where we can be able to ensure that the droughts will not affect the local? And as I said, that this national security is just a condition to permit individuals and citizens to be able to continue with their business without any fear or worry. And this one has been there since some years back. Human security just came it came up with a post-Cold War, and especially the United Nations Development Program 1994 highlighted this and came in the United Nations Assembly, and it was agreed. By then we had this the Secretary General, the late Kofi Annan, and it was accepted. So there are a number of threats in national security. But we are coming out from the traditional way of where the state are only concerned about the territorial security, looking about the borders, for example, and it has a lot of relationship with the physical security. And I want to challenge you on this physical security, especially those companies looking at the physical security. We are so much concerned about your boundary of the industry. But security has really changed. It has moved us. We have to be very much concerned about the individual, the person who is the driver, the person who is embodies other security areas to work. If we do that, then we can prevent threats. The threats are many, that we mentioned here. But you need to understand what is human security. And as you manage, then you must also make sure you protect human rights. Sometimes you have seen in the state security, sometimes you are being blamed because of human rights. And in fact, we were focusing much to see what can we do that we can manage even the demonstrations going on. That they do happen, we prevent, but we don't violate human rights. That is an area of concern. If you have academians around here, I think that's an area, a very good area for research, so that they can be able to implement their measures to deter, but no violation of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. And I want to agree with what you have said, that really there is opportunity, even for business people here. A lot of you are business people here. And when you look at security from a local perspective, you limit the solutions you can be able to offer. Yes? Human security is very, very good. Environmental challenges, climate change, how as a security expert are you able to advise organizations to prepare themselves to deal with some of these environmental challenges? The NGO one, you see, you focus on gardening. This in this field. So I want to challenge people in this expo and those who are offering solutions to be able to be broad-minded, to look at security challenges from a global perspective. We have so many global expatriates in Kenya who are doing a lot in various fields. And I can tell you for free, security cuts across all sectors. Did I say that right? Security is like communication. The way you have to learn English in school, security should be in schools. It cuts across all sectors, whether in the medical field, whether in the manufacturing, whether in the chemical aspect. The aspect of security and safety cuts across all sectors. What solutions can you offer in those sectors? Get out of the security space. Move into the humanitarian space like Dr. Katana is saying. So as we have this conversation, I'm going to give maybe 1 or 2 comments on that topic. Please introduce yourself and ask your comment or question.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me say I'm very grateful to be in this meeting today. My name is Zachary Gibaidi Sanjo. I'm the CEO and co-founder of GZ Electricals Limited, which normally deals with the major security installation. My question goes to my dear brother. Both of them, they have been security services. And my question is, what measures are we taking to prevent our own men in service not to be our threat to the security? Because we normally talk about security threat. We normally talk about security measures. But we find that out of our own, there are so many things that are happening, and corruption, due to corruption, it compromises everything. You find that men in service are the ones that are big threat to our security. What measures are we going to do to prevent
to address the men in uniform who are responsible for security but are sometimes turning out to be the threat? We call that the internal threat. Now, a number of years ago, at the Kenya School of Government, a program started under the leadership of the previous Inspector General Boynet, which was establishing trust and legitimacy in the National Police Service. Establishing trust and legitimacy in the National Police Service. And it was a program that was driven in conjunction with some of our sector partners, and that already has infused into the structure. We did realize at the time, of course, that this is going to take quite a long time before it sets into all the spaces, but you understand that as a country, since Westgate, we moved into more of a multi-agency kind of format as far as security is concerned, and you can see that as how we're dealing with the issue of cattle rustling in Maringo. You can see that happening very much. So across various layers, not only the National Police Service, even within the Kenya Defence Forces, there's also that ability where internally, the learnings, the lessons, as my brother has just said, some statements that are being made. However, beyond that, at a macro level, there are also things that are being addressed. Currently, you saw the former Chief Justice Maraga was asked, together with his team, to go and find out from everybody how is it that we can address the challenges that the National Police Service is facing. And he went and they found deplorable housing situations, they found that maybe the salaries are not adequate, they found that perhaps some of the kitting. So all those things are already being currently addressed. Those will now come into policy layer and into the structures that I just presented, which is your national security areas. Introduce yourself at the nearest police station. Just look at that. Community policing is another way. Right now there's an established, we call it Police Nirafiki, which was initiated in Kiambu. And right now it has thousands and thousands of members. Actually, it has reduced the crime rate in Ruaka and Banana, Moshada, and all those areas. Yeah? In fact, if you look at Kiambu as in general, places like Kingero, those places you can see that crime has reduced because of community policing, which is enabling the community to work much closer with police. So police people realize are also human beings. When he takes off his uniform, he also has a family, his children have to go to school. things like that. But what that does, we call it UTU. Here UTU, it helps now for the policeman or the policewoman themselves to not only feel an honorable part of the community, but it also stabilizes, even from a mental health perspective, which was our last presentation, the structure internally of that particular policeman or policewoman. So what can you do from this room? Go and introduce yourself to your nearest OCS. Let the OCS know you. There's nothing to hide. Let the OCPD know you. Let your local people be aware that you are a good member of the community, and if you have a community estate organization, get your chairman of the estate organization to go and introduce themselves and introduce the community. Nyumba Kumi was also an initiative. Unfortunately, it didn't have enough petrol. It's not yet flourished the way we want it to flourish, but community policing, I can tell you for a fact, is working. Just last weekend, we celebrated 8th-year anniversary of community policing in Kiambu, and it was a very good celebration. Also, make a comment on the same.
I think what we should do, first thing is to appreciate those officers who do that job for us, who secure this country. I want to start from a very different perspective. That security has surely changed, totally changed. Not the one you used to see some years back, where one officer could escort 10 to 20 prisoners to police station. So, I think the only thing that do in your organization is to invest a lot in academia and security. If you don't do so, you find things will not work the way you want. Because if you continue doing things on the traditional way, they will not succeed. And I want to give you a story, explained from the Bible because of time. We had two men, George and Thomas, I think, and because they were only putting things on one side, one day they walked long distance, and there was hunger, they were very hungry, nothing to eat. And what they did, someone said you could pray to God, and then maybe you could change whatever is there for them to get food. And I think they were told to carry stones, each of them to carry a stone, to choose any side of a stone, and they did. So this guy who did not want to follow what others do, decided to carry a very small stone because he doesn't want to carry everything. Others carry big stones, for example. So they walked long distance. The one was only with the heavy stones. So when it came time to pray to God, one prayed, God heard, and then he turned all those stones to bread, according to the size you have carried. So this gentleman who was putting things on one side received a very small thing which could not be adequately imagined. So we must invest a lot in academia. The same group again another day, the one who had a small stone got another group, and they did the same process. So he decided to carry the biggest stone because he was very sure that bread will come after some few minutes. So he struggled, he took a block. Others carried very small ones because they didn't know what happened. But you know what God made? He made a miracle. When they arrived where they were heading to, they only found trees, mango trees. All types of mangoes, but they were very tall. So they were told, now what to use your stone to get the mangoes. This gentleman, because he had carried that block, he could not be able to use it. So you must, these are things I'm going to talk about security. Please kindly invest a lot in security, and especially on the academia side. I've said I have a journal I published, you can have a look at it. Although this was just for Kilifi County, but there's a lot you can learn, and especially on social factors, how they can influence personal security. This can really assist us for the sake of improving this. These measures that they are put across, as we have seen, but also depend which side are you, on the side of Thomas or the side of God. That is the thing, so that we can be able to improve that service of officers. They are doing a good job, and I'm very sure they will still enhance. But academia is mandatory for you to achieve security skills to offer for the public. Thank you.
There's one more question so that we can release people for lunch over here, Monica.
Yes, I'll take one final question, then we can.
My former senior officer. I'm also a security officer who worked in National Police Service for 19 years. And I decided to retire before the age of 40. And I'm proud to have worked in National Police Service. I would like to add my voice to what you've already said. I wish that my colleagues understand and national security as a bigger picture, and we cannot talk about national security without talking about threat to national. As an individual is under threat, then the nation is under threat. So basically, we go back to what my senior said about personal security. So from what you asked, I want to say that for the police to become efficient, this is a role that we must play, all of us. Personal integrity. It is about professionalism. It is about behavior, personal behavior, and product. You know, many people join National Police Service because mtu amesumbua pale nyumbani. Chukua hii mtu anatusumbua nyumbani. It's not about passion to join National Police Service. It is about punishment. You are just taking your child to join National Police Service as a punishment. And that is why we don't get quality services from some of our colleagues who are working in the service. I therefore go back to the community policing. You there maybe forgot to mention about internal affairs. The only big problem with internal affairs is that they are reactive. But if the thing is happen to be proactive, we can be able to secure our country from internal aggression. Number two, we have some time back it used to do a very good job. They look on integrity of the officers serving, the integrity of the security as a whole in the region aside. We therefore hear people, and we are not speaking on behalf of National Police Service, but there are many mechanisms that you can be able to assist police to be able to work well for you and for us. On issues of from maybe company perspective, there are small threats. Now we are talking about global threats. We now reduce, because as managers you also want to hear how does national security affect your company. When all these mandamanos are taking place in Kenya, the truth is all companies are closing, right? What can you do on your personal level as a company to ensure that your employees are safe to work and back? The measures of working from home during Mondays and Thursdays is also an initiative that will end up assisting the organization as a whole. I therefore do not want to take most of your time, but thank you so much, Mr. Neil and Mr. Leonel. I look forward to working in your panelist in future and maybe joining you as a trainer, because that is what I love the most. Thank you so much. God bless you.
I think this brings us to the end of the second session of this conference, day one. I want to take this opportunity to appreciate all of you for the feedback you've been able to give, the questions you've been able to ask. To my panelists, Mr. Kiilu, Mr. Katana, you have been able to demystify national security to a level that we can be able to conceptualize. So, asante sana. Can we please all give my panelists a round of applause for a good job this afternoon? At this point, I wish that we take our last break. But before we do that, I would like to recognize Mr. Barak from the State of Israel Ministry of Economic and Industry, Foreign Trade Administration. Mr. Barak, where are you? Would you please wave? We are humbled to have you in our midst, Karim Rusana. I hope you're going to be staying for the second the afternoon session. We have great stuff we're going to be discussing, so feel free to be part of this great event. Ladies and gentlemen, you are free to break for lunch. We should be here at 2 p.m. because we're late. We have a booth on my right. Food is ready, it's affordable, so please grab something to eat, like the chairman said in the morning, let's promote Kenya. Sindio? So, mchukue hapo kitu kidogo, grab something to eat. We meet here at 2 p.m. for our presentation by Mr. Ngare, who will be talking about security systems and emerging technologies, an area we all want to know what is happening. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.